Hello ladies and gentlemen and everyone beyond, I am BabyNoobCakes and this is Twitch Prime free game reviews. And in this episode, we're going to be taking a look at one of the June 2020 free games, The Flame in the Flood. This game was kickstarted and received around 150% of their actual goal. The similarly named team behind the game is called the Molasses Flood, who are a group of people who previously worked on AAA titles like BioShock, Halo 2, and Rock Band. They all got together and decided to join up to create something a little different. And this is their debut game. But now, let's attempt to answer the question, as one of the free games of the month, was it worth it? Mechanics. The Flame in the Flood is a survival game. Your goal is to make it down the river and make sure you are able to stay alive. As with most survival games, in this one, you collect loads of supplies and use those to craft the things you need to survive. I won't go through every item that you can craft, but the main categories are food to keep your hunger down, tricks and traps to deal with all of the wild animals you'll come across, medicine and first aid to treat any wounds you may end up with, tools to help you make more advanced items, and upgrades for your raft. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention the raft. The Flame in the Flood features two basic modes: scavenging and gathering while on foot as you scrounge around abandoned camps and stores long since picked clean by other looters, and the second is traveling down the river by raft. You can repair and upgrade your raft to make it stronger, to make it a more seaworthy vessel, and you can also add various comforts of home in case none are available out in the wilds. But you can't relax out on the water just because you're now safe from the wolves on land. You have to contend with floating debris, rocky outcroppings, and the scariest of all, the rapids. Because if your raft breaks, you'll drown and your journey will be over. So make sure that you don't ignore it. Just because it's a hunk of driftwood doesn't mean it won't save your life. The game also has roguelike elements, which are best noticed in the settlements that you stop at. Because every time you play, they'll be set up slightly differently and will have different items available for you to scavenge. And there are two difficulties to play on. The first and easier difficulty has more item drops and checkpoints that you can go back to if you wind up making too many mistakes and end up dead. However, don't count on those checkpoints too much. You'll still likely lose a lot of progress if you do end up dying. And the game actually resets what drops from every location every time you load in from a checkpoint, so you can't even learn where the best places to visit are. You'll still have to go and explore every time. The higher difficulty has fewer item drops and permadeath, so beware. Artstyle. The design of this game really reminds me a lot of Psychonauts for some reason. The main character's face and the other characters in the game just have that sort of cute but also disturbing asymmetry to them, almost as if something is corrupting them. But the way the graphics are rendered sort of make them look a little bit like a pop-up book, or maybe papercraft of some sort. Either way, it's pretty cartoony, and you might not think it really looks like a game that could cause you to be scared of it, but trust me, by the end, you will be afraid of the dark and what lies in wait just around the next corner. Sound. Boars squeal. Wolves howl. And the river sloshes against the bank. Rain pours down and thunder cracks the sky. The sound effects in The Flame in the Flood really immerse you in the setting. The world the game is set in is sort of a post-apocalyptic version of the southern United States. I couldn't really identify the exact state for you, but somewhere in the south for sure. And it also features a very folksy bluegrass style of background music that just really brings the setting to life. The high quality of the music here is mostly due to the main writer, Chuck Reagan, who currently is mostly a solo act, but he is formerly of the punk band Hot Water Music. And while you do meet a few strange characters along the way, there really isn't any voice acting, but it's hardly missed, as I don't think it would really add a whole lot to the experience. Replayability. In order to reach the end goal of the game, it'll take you probably around 9 to 15 hours or so. But there's also the possibility that you might actually just have to restart the game because you just didn't prepare enough or just didn't fully understand what you needed for yourself in order to survive. You should definitely prioritize some items over others because they'll keep you alive for longer. For example, a torch and a bandage need about the same amount of materials to make, but you can use torches to scare away animals from you so that they won't ever attack you. But you may also need those same items to make something else. So do you risk getting attacked by animals and possibly having to make yourself bandages to patch yourself up? Or do you make a torch in order to stay safe? Or do you really roll the dice and make that third item, leaving yourself without materials for torches or bandages, and risk not being able to do anything if you end up being attacked by an animal? Death is a real possibility in this game. And if you've made too many mistakes, sometimes starting over from scratch might just be the way to go. When you're starting up a new playthrough, you also have the option of going into endless mode. So technically, you can play this game forever if you really want to. Narrative. The Flame in the Flood is set in a fictional Southern American location that has been completely and utterly decimated by, at the very least, a flood, if not something else as well. It's a bit unclear if there was anything else going on, but it's definitely true that society here has fully collapsed. In the opening cutscene, a dog with a backpack arrives at the campsite of the main character, Scout. She's been camped out here for who knows how long, but when the dog shows up, she seems to gain the impetus to find a better place to live. There's a radio in the backpack, and she can only get a slight signal from it, but someone out there is broadcasting. And in the world that we are presented with, nature has retaken its foothold as the dominant force in the world. And while a few people still make their homes in the wilderness, the protagonist seeks to rejoin with society by any means necessary, and hops on her raft in order to find high ground in order to get a better signal for the radio broadcast. I definitely won't spoil the end of the game, but what I will say is that is about the extent of the storyline. Anyone looking for any sort of deep narrative really isn't going to find it here. Unless you count your own story that you make along the way. And while you do meet a few other NPCs throughout your journey, none of them really have a whole lot to add to the overall narrative. Most of them are traders or just other people trying to make it in the world after the fall of civilization. My opinion. The Flame in the Flood was a really fun experience, with survival games being a dime a dozen these days, and when every one of them usually feels the need to have a bigger and bigger inventory of stuff to craft and more resources to farm, this game takes a very simple approach that is refreshing. And even when I did have materials and gadgets and food for myself, I still never felt truly safe. But I would say that the biggest shortcomings of this game are that there are only so many tiers of things that you can craft. Or maybe it's the hard limit of how much storage space you can have. Or, you know what, maybe that's the wrong way to say it, because I just praised the game for taking a more simplistic angle. Maybe it's more that this game is just a bit too long. because towards the end of my run, I found myself passing by almost every single dock. Because I was so stocked with food and water and other supplies, it really didn't make any sense for me not to just keep progressing down the river, which is the end goal of the game. I had put all the upgrades on my raft that I wanted, I had made all the tools. I never did wind up getting the heaviest clothing you can in the game, but what I had was good enough for the most part, and I just wanted to finish the story. I was playing on the easier mode, so maybe if I had been on the more difficult permadeath mode, I may have still needed to stop for supplies towards the end of the game. So I guess what I'm saying is, perhaps the game drags on a little bit too long, but not so much that it ever becomes tedious or annoying. And maybe I didn't need to stop at every single pier earlier in the game and make sure that I cleared every single suitcase, crate, and abandoned building that I could, because I always had the option to just keep moving down the river. You can just choose not to stop and still be fine. And sometimes you do need to run away from a location and get back to the river because of the wild animals. But, I didn't really encounter that problem too much, but that's because of a small little bug I found in the game. So what happened was, I had a torch, it ran down to 0%, but somehow it kept it in my inventory, and every time I would pull out a torch, it would pull out this 0% torch, and it wound up becoming immortal. I don't know what I did, but it was obviously a glitch of some sort, and I think it wound up making the game a lot easier for me because I never had to build torches anymore, and could just scare animals away forever. It still didn't work in the rain, so I still had to contend with that. So if you see in the footage that my torch is at 0%, but I'm still scaring away animals, that's why. I also encountered a few other bugs with some of the more scripted parts of the game. There's one part in particular after a dialogue with an NPC that you automatically disembark from a dock and start rafting. However, my character had a snakebite, and all of my snakebite cures were on my raft, which I wasn't allowed to access up until after that cutscene. And so as soon as the dialogue was finished, I was trying to access my inventory. And when the game pushed me out onto the river again, I still had my inventory open, and it wound up getting stuck open while I was rafting. And because of this, I couldn't control the raft. I was able to cure my snakebite, but I wasn't able to control my raft, or see anything. Which ended up in me dying, which makes sense. And so I reloaded the checkpoint. However, I must have cured my snakebite about 2 seconds before it would have killed me, because about 2 seconds after I loaded up, I died from the snakebite. Luckily, the game saves 2 checkpoints, and I went a little further back, but again I had to repeat a stage of the game just because of this odd sequence of events that happened. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that the game isn't perfect, and you might experience some bugs. But other than the fact that I thought the game was just a little bit too long for its own good, I'd say overall, it was really well paced. The crafting I mentioned earlier never seemed overbearing, as there really aren't that many recipes as compared to some other survival games that I've played, where there are 18 different tiers of each item, and it's just an endless grind to upgrade. In The Flame and the Flood, all of the items that you create are for the most part pretty simple, and the active resource management in this game is pretty easy. I never had to look up which items to prioritize because I only crafted on a needed basis. Whatever I needed, I made. I know some of my criticisms and praise are a bit contradictory here, but I think that's just because the game found itself a real sweet spot in terms of gameplay, and I feel like I have to say something more than just, it's cool, I like it, it's great, whatever. Was it worth it? I think that anyone who enjoys crafting survival games is probably going to get a few hours of fun out of this one for sure. And even those of you who have tried crafting survival games in the past, but found them overblown and a bit tedious, you still might want to check this one out. because the collecting and crafting systems are pretty simple overall. And this game is more about the strategy of knowing when to craft items and when to hold on to your resources. Survival never becomes an afterthought. In some survival games, after the first few hours of playing, making sure that you're fed and hydrated stops being an issue because you just have so much food and water. However, in this game, survival is always on your mind. Food is scarce or a huge risk to obtain. There isn't a lot of clean water available to you, and what you can carry is pretty limited. Anyway, back to the evaluation here. This game comes in at about $15, and it is a bit of an older game. It's been around for a while. It's about 4 years old at this point, and if you end up playing through this one and want more from the same developer, their second game, called Drake Hollow, is due the 17th of June 2020. And as far as system requirements go, they're on screen now, so you can take a look. And I would imagine almost every computer, as long as you have a video card, can run this. The game is pretty simple to learn and pretty simple to play, and while it might not be the newest or nicest looking game, I had heard of The Flame in the Flood before I played it this month. And I think there's a reason for that name recognition, because this game has an immersive world, easily understood gameplay, and enough danger to keep you on your toes throughout the entirety of it. With all that in mind, I'm going to say that this one is definitely worth it. I might even say that this is probably one of the best Twitch Prime games that I personally have played. But maybe that's for you to decide. Whether you agree or disagree with my judgment, get at me in the comments. Let me know what you think, and let's discuss if this month's games were worth it or not. Also, don't forget to go to the Twitch app and download your free games every month, because hey, they're free, and sometimes you'll end up with a few gems. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please like, comment, and subscribe, because I take a look at the Twitch Prime free games every month. But until then, I'll catch you later.